So for this week on Cyber School, it's been a crazy couple of weeks, months here at CyberData. We've been working internally on coming out with a new type of technology, hybrid paging technology, with launching with our new product, the SIP paging 25 volt, 70 volt amplifier. We've been anxious at CyberData to get some new product out there, and we've got one ready. And we really think internally this is going to really change up some stuff in the market. So today we'll kind of focus on the specific product itself and what stuff we're adding with it. And we might have another couple segments in here in our growing cyber data series of Cyber School, where we're going to add and talk a little bit more about some applications for this product. But for today's focus, we're going to talk specifically about this product and what we're going to be offering with this. So first and foremost, what is this? What is hybrid paging technology, and what is the SIP paging 2570 volt amplifier? Well, this is a combination of SIP, multicast, and analog paging technology all in one box that gives you that hybrid paging technology. This combines the features in the feature sets of the SIP paging server and the SIP paging adapter. So that way you get both multicast send and receive, and of course all of the bells and whistles of the paging server, pun intended, with an analog amplifier, all in a single box. So it gives you a single device that you can purchase that will provide both that constant voltage paging capability, as well as multicast output and multicast receive to tie into existing multicast environment. So it's a multifaceted device that can provide you a lot of functionality out there and create that real hybrid paging solution. This is going to, of course, in the name, it supports both 25 and 70 volt speaker deployments, as well as self-amplified speakers using the line out of the unit. So that way you can tie into some existing speaker capabilities, but we're really going to be focusing on the 25 and the 70 volt options there. Of course, with the design with this, and when you're dealing with different analog amplifiers, a big question can come up, is it multi-zone or single zone analog capability? Meaning, does it process DTMF to select a physical analog zone? It does not. It only has a single analog zone, but you can add in multi-zone capability with something like multicast. So that way you can page to, say, outdoor IP66 horns or other multicast-enabled devices to increase zoning capability there, or use subsequent SIP paging 2570 volt amplifiers for additional analog zone capability. So it really provides you a lot of options for large multi-zone paging. So let's talk a little bit about the specifics. Since this is different than what CyberData usually offers, it's not, say, a speaker or an intercom, or, like one of our smaller devices like a paging adapter or a paging server. This is a lot bulkier of a unit. It's a big unit. This is actually fully rack mountable, as you saw in that initial image there. This is going to be a 1.5U rack mount chassis. And that U, just for everybody's information, if you're not familiar with this, I wasn't necessarily familiar with how big an actual quote U is. Each U space is going to be 1.75 inches. So it's just about 3 inches or so, give or take. So it's a good size, and it's going to easily mount into any existing server rack infrastructure that you might have. If you don't, it does have removable rack ears, so that way you can go and mount it to, very commonly, a sheet of plywood and put it up there, in your telecom room or your server room. If your server rack is already full, it gives you a lot of capabilities to mount it there. And of course, if you want, we're including rubber feet with it as well, so that way you can just set it on top of a desk and you don't need the rack ears at all, and you can just take those off completely. So another way that this is going to differentiate itself from standard CyberData equipment, where almost everything that we supply is going to be PoE powered. Of course, since this is a large rack-mounted style unit that's going to be powering a lot of amplified analog speakers, it's going to be AC powered. So this one is not going to need any PoE power, and it's actually, even if you did, say, connect it to a PoE port, it's only going to negotiate a regular network connection because this thing is fully AC powered. So you're going to plug it into the regular mains and get power from it there. And don't you worry, any of your any users that might be outside of the States that don't use a traditional, 110, 120 volt like we get here in the States, it can automatically switch to upwards of 240 volts if you're going to be using it internationally. So there's no little switches or anything that you have to worry about on the backside of it, before you plug it in somewhere, say in Europe, that doesn't use the standard voltage that we use here in the States. It can handle that automatically. So no need to worry as long as you're plugging it into the mains that supports either 100 through 240 volts. When you're dealing with the different wattages in terms of the speaker capabilities and the kind of budget that it can support, it's going to vary between both 25 and 70 volt modes, depending on what you put it in there. Basically, the more volts you give it, the more power that it can push out. When you're running at 25 volt implementation, you're going to be dealing with 160 watts total to be able to play with. Of course, you can't use that full 160 watts. You want to leave some for overhead. But if you're running at 70 volts, that gives you 391 of a maximum budget, meaning that's how much you can have. That's the theoretical maximum of the unit. You want to have 20% less of that. We'll cover that in a whole nother video, going more in depth in how to deploy a lot of these speakers. But again, for today's focus, we're just specifically talking about the 2570 amplifier and what kind of products we're launching with it. And another new thing that we're adding with the new device here is an LCD screen. So it gives you some kind of heads up information. We figured that would be extremely powerful in a lot of server room environments. So that way you can check just the temperature of it and get different status information directly on a small LCD screen that's mounted in the unit itself. So, of course, since we're going out and manufacturing and marketing an analog amplifier, we got to pair that with some analog speakers. So we're also going to be offering both ceiling and wall mount style analog speakers that you can pair with this unit, which is really advantageous for new deployments there because it gives you a single point of contact, not only for the multicast paging interface, the analog interface to those speakers, but also the speakers. So we kind of become a full one-stop shop for anybody that's looking to do overhead paging, where it's analog paging or multicast enabled and IP capable paging. Horns are going to be available for louder areas as well. So that way you've got the full trifecta of your ceiling mount style, your wall mount style, and horns for your louder environments. All of our speakers and the horn are going to support both 25 and 70 volt applications with a whole bunch of different wattage taps that are available. And of course, for those that aren't familiar, since we mainly handle IP related stuff, anytime that you're going to be hearing the word taps, that's really the output power of the actual speaker or horn. And that's how you select that there. And we'll talk about that in a moment. And when you're going to be wiring these things, which is a big distinction as compared to our standard IP speakers that you're used to from CyberData, where those all need a home run to go back to the particular switch that they're connecting to. When you're dealing with analog speakers, you can wire these in parallel, or you can daisy chain them, where you connect to the first speaker and the first speaker connects to the second speaker, and so on and so forth. So that way you've only got that one, quote, home run cable that just goes back to the amplifier, and then everything else is going to be wired in parallel, meaning speaker A to B to C to so on and so forth to connect through all the different speakers there. So what's a tap? That's completely different language that we've never really talked about when they're dealing with IP speakers. Tap is an AV term, an audiovisual term for the actual wattage that's going to be applied to a speaker. An easy way to think about this, because nobody here needs to be, a analog speaker expert. There are companies that deal with this specifically, and they're probably, raising their fist and screaming at the sky at me because I'm really dumbing this down. When you're dealing with more watts and you're picking a tap with a higher wattage, you're getting more sound out of the speaker just because you're giving more power to the actual speaker so it can make more sound. More watts equals more sound. Simple as that. And of course, this is going to apply to either 25 volt or 70 volt speakers. And taps are they vary across the entire industry in terms of speakers. Some manufacturers can go very low in taps and some can go very high. But common taps that you'll see across the wide industry, whether it's our speakers or anybody else's speakers, you run into 1 watt, 2 watt, 5 watt, 10 watt, 15 and 30 watt taps, which again are just a power selection of what's going to be used by that particular speaker in this constant voltage system. So now that you have a little bit more information about that, let's talk a little bit about the software. We've been spending a lot of time talking about the actual hardware of the unit itself, but the software is super important. So like I mentioned initially, this new 2570 volt amplifier is a combination of both our SIP paging server and our SIP paging adapter. It's mainly more of a SIP paging server. We basically took the same full feature set of that. So it's got the 100 multicast paging group capability, built-in support for Wi-Fi buttons, a calendar, a calendar-based bell scheduler, multi-user login support, Polycom paging. All of those features are put into the 25-volt, 70-volt paging amplifier, but also adds in the multicast receive capability, because you might be deploying this into an environment that, say, uses Polycom phones or Yealink phones, or heck, even a CyberData paging server. And you've already got all that set up, and you don't really want to migrate that onto a new device. Well, just have your new 25 70-volt paging amplifier receive the multicast from that multicast source. That way you can tie that easily in. So it combines all the best features of both of those products into a single box. And when you're going through, and if you want to select the different voltage mode, 25 volt or 70 volt mode, you have to do that through the web interface. We determined, just because the way that you could potentially damage 25 volt speakers if you put them into 70 volt mode, we don't want that kind of capability being handled through the front panel interface, just because that could potentially lead to issues down the line. Somebody could get into your server room, press a couple buttons unknowingly on the 25 70 volt paging amplifier, and go and break a whole bunch of speakers. Nobody wants to do that. You don't let the magic blue smoke out of the wires. So we determined that if you want to make that change, you have to do it through the web interface of the device, which you can easily protect. But what you can change through the front panel of the interface is a master volume adjustment, which basically allows you to kind of step up or step down the master volume of all of those analog speakers from either the front panel or the web interface. And those that are cautious or concerned about any adjustments whatsoever from the front panel, that can be disabled via the web interface. So that way, just like our old SIP speakers that used to have the volume dial, you can completely disable any adjustments from the front panel if you want. So that way you don't have to worry about anything there. But we haven't really talked much about this new LCD screen that we have. So this LCD screen has multiple different tabs or screens that you can tab through. So when you boot this unit up, and when it's generally sitting idle, it's going to give you the CyberData splash screen, which basically tells you, hey, this is a CyberData product, here's its part number. If you press the tab button to cycle over to the serial number and mode, it'll tell you the device's serial number as well as the 25 or 70 volt mode. So on and so forth. For screen number 3, you get the actual temperature of the device and the status of its fans, because it does have fans built into it for active cooling capability, and you can adjust it. It's going to show both in Celsius and Fahrenheit. So those that are very familiar with a lot of electronics, it typically comes in Celsius, but for us here in the States, those numbers don't really mean that much to us. So being able to pair that easily with Fahrenheit can teach us all the superior Celsius capability to be able to get their temperature information there. But of course, you can also get the IP address and the MAC address directly from the device. You can use screen number 5 to get the firmware version and the part number. Number 6, you can check the master volume level. And then if you want to run the test audio capability, that standard, this is your CyberData IP speaker test message, to be able to test the audio output, you can do that via screen number 7. And when you tab over to screen number 7, because our LCD display does have full color capability, that page is going to show in green. Moving forward, I did touch about our speakers, but I wanted to just give the specific part numbers for them. So we've got the 3 different speakers, technically 2 speakers and a horn, but for conversation's sake, we'll call them speakers, that are going to be available from CyberData. So we've got our traditional ceiling mount style speaker. It's going to be an analog option. It is a single speaker that supports both 25, 70 volt and 8 ohm capability, launching at $68 MSRP with the following wattage taps of 1.25 watts, 3.75 watts, 10 watts, and 30 watt taps. That way you get a huge amount of range in terms of output capability, and hopefully you can find that nice Goldilocks zone for you out of that particular ceiling mount speaker. And one nice little touch with this thing that I really like about our ceiling mount speaker is that nice little grill that we have on there front is actually a magnet you can easily remove to get access to that little tap dial. So that way, once the speaker is mounted, you don't have to go through the pain of taking down the ceiling tile to get to the back of the unit to get wires to deal with. Ours are just set via dial. That way, if you want to turn it up a little bit and you have the budget left on the amplifier to be able to adjust it, you can just adjust that while the unit is actually mounted in place. Of course, turn off the power before you do that. Don't make any adjustments to any speaker water taps while the unit is powered. That's always just a good recommendation there. For our wall mount option, it's going to be a really nice, sleek looking wall mount style. And this one is also going to be available in 1.25, 3.75, 10 and 30 watt taps. And finally, for our horn, it's going to be virtually identical to the standard IP66 analog horn that we issue today with our loudspeaker amplifier. It's actually very nice for that aspect. And this one, of course, is available in both 25 volt, 70 volt, and 8 ohm. And this one has has one less taps than our standard speakers do. And this one's going to be available in 2, 7, 10, and 15 watt tap configurations. And of course, again, all of these I'm not mentioning with the taps there. It is in the name, but these do also support 8 ohm capability. That way, if for some reason you want to use these for an 8 ohm option, you have that capability with it. So in general, our SIP paging 25 volt amplifier. This is going to be the best option out there in the market for large single zone paging. Just because if you're trying to do this with IP speakers, you're going to be paying a whole bunch more money than you would with a standard analog configuration. Analog is just better when you're dealing with a large single zone paging configuration. And a good example of that would be something like a hallway, a large auditorium, or maybe a warehouse. It's always going to be better to do it analog because it's going to be substantially cheaper and much easier to install. This product really incorporates a lot of the best features of our paging server and our paging adapter into a single package. We really spent a lot of time thinking about the feature set of this product, and we really are confident in the software capabilities of this unit. Combining both multicast output and receive makes it a integral part of the new cyber data ecosystem as we're going to be moving forward here. Whether you're tying in products like our SIP call button that have the capability to both send a SIP call and multicast on button press, make the SIP paging 2570 volt amplifier an easy recipient of that multicast in addition to the rest of your products out there. But a big thing with this, as we're just seeing, everybody being a lot more price conscious and budget conscious as they're going and planning their different deployments out there. This is going to be one of the most cost-effective options for large-scale paging that are going to be available on the market today.